Okay, here's a question for you. Why doesn't Jesus deal with all the issues and topics, like major topics, and we'll get a list there. Why doesn't he, or does he, is another question. You could rephrase the question into that. Questions such as, I'll read some of these: sexual orientation, slavery, misogyny, government. Why doesn't he deal with politics? He doesn't talk about political situation of Rome oppressing the people of Israel. There was some pretty heavy oppression. Why doesn't he seem to talk about kidnapping or, all these issues, subjects? There's tons of them. Well, I propose to you that he didn't have to, because one word from Jesus, just one little statement, can open up a huge arena of truth that will set free and give direction to all those various areas. And even if he didn't directly did it, and maybe he did it indirectly, which I believe so, he also had his followers who were filled with the Spirit of Jesus, who spoke through Paul. And he had a lot of things to say. Peter did, and James. And so through the New Testament, you have it. You have a lot in the Old Testament. You have a lot in the New Testament. And slavery, what about that one? Oh my goodness, does God's word really condone slavery? He obviously allowed it, and all, but what happened? Well, there is a progressive, let's talk about that one just briefly, and maybe on another video I can go a little bit more in depth. There's definitely a tendency for God a lot of times to do a progressive revelation, which you may not like, but there's reason for it. He gave man free will, and he gave him the management of the earth and relations and governments and all. Then he brought his people out of Egypt, and he established a nation, his own nation. And it was God over, it was God's, he was the king of that nation. And he gave laws on how to treat slaves and all that. But why even have slaves? Because basically people have had slaves for years, way before that. It was established in the human DNA to overpower people. But also, just a whole nother quick thing is that slavery back then was different a lot of times than slavery now. Sure, they were mistreating slaves, but and also there were many, maybe massive, maybe the majority of them weren't like oppressed slaves. They chose to be slaves, or like owed people, and so they became sort of employees relations. So it's different than the American, bless their hearts, the black population was enslaved by force and all that. Of course, slavery has been enforced in every nation, every country almost, as far as I know, is the history of it. So it's not just America. And so, but I am saying that I think Jesus didn't necessarily speak directly to slaves. Of course, he healed some of them. That's showing a lot of value. Remember the centurion's servant, his slave? He healed him by by a word, and he got totally healed. Or how about the guy, Malchus' servant, with the right ear was cut off by Peter, and Jesus healed his ear right on the spot. But I would suggest that the words of Jesus, revolutionary words, were so powerful and radical that it established things in the hearts of the disciples and understanding of them as they grew in that understanding. The revelation, that progressive revelation, kind of set them free. It led them into everything: the value of life, the value of relationships, the value of sexuality, when it talks about Adam and Eve in Matthew 19. And so, is Jesus against same-sex marriages? I hope you don't get offended, but yeah, he is. He didn't set it up that way. It wasn't what God's design, and it definitely isn't all body design. It's male and female for procreation. And you say, well, Jesus really never dealt with homosexuals or whatever, or bisexuals. Yes, he did. In a way, if you take just a few passages like Matthew 19, when he says, God made man and woman, and they're cleaved together, and he established this is what it is. And that covered all the other, anything that's outside of that wasn't God's design. I'm sorry, but that's true. And I'm not apologizing for the truth, but I apologize if you don't like it. I'm sorry that you're maybe offended by that, but that's the way it is. And God designed it. And when you stand before God, he's going to say, yep, that's what I did. And so what I'm saying is Jesus did indeed deal with issue after issue after issue. just the idea of love your neighbor as yourself, and the illustration of him with the guy who said, well, who is my neighbor? In Luke, and Luke, what was that, chapter 10? No, that's not chapter 10. I know that chapter. I can't remember it right now. Where, I'm trying to think, 16, 17, 18, 19. I can't remember which one. Anyway, where the Samaritan, that were hated, he said, this is how you treat your neighbor and value them. And so, what else? Misogyny, hatred of women, basically. And look what he did. He took women, and they were part of his ministry. He loved them. He treated them. He valued them. Look at the woman of the well, how he dealt with them all the way through. The whole thing was just fantastic love, concern, and equality with women. And that's why Paul in Galatians chapter 3, 3:18 is it, where it literally says that there's neither male nor female, neither slave nor free. I mean, all of them are equal. So that all came from Jesus and his quick words. How about the quick word about render under Caesar what is Caesar's, and under God what is God's? Just that little word, boom. That we are supposed to, I think, obey the laws of government, unless they're against God, of course. Jesus himself would verify that. You don't go against God. And Peter said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And he was with Jesus learning the teachings of Jesus. So they knew what he was like and what you're supposed to do. So it's all contained in the fertile power of the seeds of the words of Jesus Christ that actually covers all it. Love your neighbor as yourself means everybody. Then he also, going back to the women, he first visited Mary. Mary of Magdala, that was his first appearance out of about 13 appearances, probably 12, easily 12. Of the resurrection, he visited her, which is like, wow, that you think, well, what's so significant about that? See, you don't feel the significance because that wonderful word of Jesus and what he did has actually set people free. And I think it's the Christian principles of ethics and all that has caused the world to change in the sense of slavery, abolitionist movement. You say, yeah, but they use those passages, they misuse them, they abuse the passages on slavery to enslave people. And then, by the way, slavery, I'm going all over the place, sorry. That great letter to Philemon, which is that slave owner, he said, Onesimus, came back to him. He said, treat him like a brother in that verse. Brother? That was radical. That's revolutionary. He had escaped and he said he got saved, come back, and then I bet he could have said, you know what, you're free. And he owed him and all that. But again, slavery is another thing that we're coming through a 21st century mindset of what slavery is, and that it was different in those days. And that's proof, by the way. There's a lot of truth in history from scholars that can say how it really was. Anyway, so did I cover a lot of those? Slavery, government? Yeah, I did a lot of those. So I really think that it's legitimate to say that Jesus actually did, in the kernel of the words of Jesus, is all that we needed with ethics and morality and treatment of people and everything. So I hope that answers, well, nobody asked that question. I just decided to share that. Hope that enlightens. I think I'm right on that. All right, God bless you. Bye.